gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Watch out now. Cause baby, I feel real good and I wish I would. Watch out now. It's gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Watch out now. Everybody watch out. Watch out now. I'm ready for a good time, and I came to groove. The whole band's here, and we came to move. Got a fresh haircut and 2 new shoes. We're here all night like we got nothing to lose. I'm coming out the jacket, cause we're turning up the heat. I wanna see you clapping when you get up out your seat. It's time to make it happen when we hit these streets. I'm coming in hot, and I can't be beat. Watch out now.
Hello, world. Welcome back to Chuck Levin's Live. I'm Adam Levin. I got Lee Walkowicz with me. Lee,
hey, folks.
How's it going up there, Lee?
Everything is going just fine. Good to be with you folks.
We got a great one here today, everyone. We have a living legend with us. We have Tony Scodwell. This is going to be amazing. We're going to hear history. We're going to hear about instruments. We're going to hear about playing, some of the biggest bands of all time with some of the greatest players of all time. And guys, as usual, ask some questions. This is a unique opportunity to have direct access to Tony himself. It's going to be a phenomenal time, so don't be shy. Ask some great questions, and whoever asks the best questions, we're going to give some stuff away. As usual, we have some of Tony's Scodwell USA Polo shirts, different sizes, different colors. You get your pick, so ask some great questions. You can drop them in the comments. We got guys behind the scenes that are going to be monitoring these questions. And as we get time, we're going to throw them in and we'll just let the guys answer them and have a great time. We're going to play some music. We're going to go everywhere we need to go. This is going to be a great time. So I think, without further ado, everyone, let's get to this. Let's bring the man in himself. Let's bring Tony on. Let's go for it. Tony.
Adam, you're too kind.
Oh,
hey, Tony, how are you? Good to see you, buddy.
Hello, Lee.
All the way from Vegas. Tony, how's it going?
110 degrees. That's how it's going.
That's a nice cool day. I hear it's a nice dry heat.
Yeah, right.
You can still fry an egg on the sidewalk.
Oh, my God. Turn your oven on to 500 degrees, open the door, and stand in front of it. That's exactly what it is.
I imagine so. All right. Anyway, welcome everyone to our streaming session here, and we are with the great Las Vegas trumpet legend, Mr. Tony Scodwell. Tony and I've known him for almost 30 years at this point in time, and he's a very dear friend of mine. And we've asked him to come on board here to talk about his trumpets, which are marvelous, and also his career. He's got some great stories because he's played literally with some of the finest musicians and artists over the last 50 years or so. Including people like Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Sammy Davis, Diana Ross, Lena Horne, Elvis Presley, Tom Jones, Barbara Streisand. He played lead trumpet with Stan Kenton, Harry James, Buddy Rich, and of course Doc Severinsen. There's too many people on this list to acknowledge, but if I'm sorry to let your name off, I'm sorry. The career expands so much stuff, and it's just an incredible career. It's worth hearing about. Tony has toured the world with all these people. And he's even been on various TV shows, including the Ed Sullivan Show back in the day with Harry James, an NBC TV special with Sinatra and Friends, and he also did something on HBO with Diana Ross. He's played on the stages at Carnegie Hall and even here at the Kennedy Center here in Washington. But more importantly, Tony does make, in my opinion, one of the best trumpets on the market. Where I'm very fortunate to work here, Chuck Levin's, where we sell all the great names and equipment, Bach, Yamaha, Schilke, Shawgirl, Shires, Getzen, all the great names and trumpets. Tony might not be the most, household name, but when people come in to actually try horns, I work his horn into the mix, and invariably his horn rises to the top as being the champ, and rightly so, because they sound great, they play great, they're made incredibly well. Probably the most in-tune trumpet I personally have ever played. Just a marvelous instrument. He's got several different models that we can talk about. But before we go there, let's actually find out more about Tony. So, Tony, tell us about yourself, okay?
The only thing I want to backtrack, first trumpet was Stan Kenton. No.
Oh, okay.
That was a good friend of mine, Tommy Perello, when I was on the band. Played really wonderful first trumpet on the band. I played first mellophonium.
Ah, okay, there we go.
And so that's just a minor clerical error, but yeah, that's
okay.
to play first trumpet on that band is not trivial. But also, I tell you, the mellophoniums, everyone, they have a name for it. It begins with a B-A-S-T. Especially the trombones the trumpets weren't so bad. The trumpet section weren't really too hard on us. The trombones were unrelentless with their negativity. And I happen to have a recording that we did the very last tour in England. And prior to that, we were rehearsing at the Kenton band camps they used to have in Michigan State and Indiana and those places. And we were preparing for this British tour. And Johnny Richards had rewritten the Cuban Fire Suite to suit the mellophonium band, because originally it had 2 French horns and not 4 mellophoniums. So, but the Johnny Richards arrangements on the great West Side Story recording from Stan Kenton. I'd love to brag on this one, because I'll tell you what, I'll put my section up against any of them in that band as far as pitch, phrasing. And Johnny would write 2 up, 2 down, an octave, up to C's, D's above the staff, unisons. Now, those horns, for the trumpet players out there, when's the last time you figured an A above the staff first and third? Yeah, that was the only thing that worked on the mellophoniums. Wow. They were intended to play in E flat, and Stan and Johnny both wanted in F because of the French horn background. So at any rate, they were in F, and it whacked out the pitch even more. But we went about 6 weeks into the tour. We were in Chicago, and I had studied with Reynold Schilke personally, and I was, I played his horn at the time. And I went to see Ren, and I said, "You got to help us. I mean, we're 3 trumpet players and a French horn player in the section." He says, "Okay." Now, those Kahn 16Es had a cornet shank. So Reynold went out and put together a Phil Farkas French horn cup on a cornet shank. I don't know what backbore he used, and then he put our trumpet rims on our respective mouthpieces. And damn if it didn't work much better. And still wasn't perfect, because the horns were hardly perfect. But when you hear this recording I'm going to brag about, you judge for yourself on those unisons up above the staff and tell me.
Okay. Adam, can we pull that recording up, or at least part of it at least anyway?
Which recording are we talking about? I only know the names of the songs. We might get there. Should we go there now?
Yeah, would you? Because it's pertinent to what I was talking about.
So what's the name of this one?
Maria.
Maria. I got it, guys. Brace yourself.
From West Side Story.
Take that, John Bone.
Yeah. Very nice, Tony. Very nice.
Amazing.
The
Amazing.
yeah, it's you had to live with those things, 7 days a week, and it didn't hurt to be 18, 19 years old either. But
Of course.
I joined the band right out of Berkeley when I, in your old alma mater, Lee.
Yeah.
I went out to front of school one day on Newberry Street when it used to be up there, and Herb Pomeroy standing there talking to somebody that still to this day I respect Herbie probably as much as anybody I've ever known in the music business. He was amazing.
One of the best for sure.
And he said, "Tony, come here a second. I'd like you to meet somebody." He said, "This is Jim Amelot. He's Stan Kenton's manager." And I went, "Oh, well, that's cool." And I'm in my second semester at Berkeley. He says, "Would you like to join the Kenton band?" I was like, "What?" And he says, yeah, they need a mellophonium player. Well, I knew what they were, but I never held one, let alone played one. So I said, absolutely. A kid who didn't have the brains he probably should have had. Anyway, that night was off. I got on the bus, went to New York. I didn't play that night because Louis Gasca was still in the section and he was going to finish up. And so I sat in my hotel room with my mellophonium, and now it's in F, and I'm not perfect pitch, but I certainly hear everything very well in B flat. And it was like, holy God, every note was an adventure. So anyway, the next night was we left New York and played that night in Chicago. That was a normal one-nighter for Kenton. And that was my first night on the band, and finished up the last 6 weeks of that tour and went back to school to Berkeley and rejoined my third semester. And Stan, I didn't know what the situation was. And Stan had said, well, I'll let you know in plenty of time, because he was very, very good band leader. He said anybody who was on the band the previous tour had first shot at coming back out. So in April, he called and said, be at Capitol Studio A. We're going to record Artistry and Bossa Nova. And I walked into the studio, that famous Studio A, and Ray Starling was the first mellophonium player on the previous tour, and a marvelous musician, piano, trumpet. This guy was amazing, and an arranger. So anyway, I don't see Ray, and I said to Stan, "Where's Ray?" He said, "Oh, he's not coming back. You're playing first."
Wow.
Now I walk into Capitol Studio A, and all of a sudden I'm the first mellophonium player. Yeah.
Scary moment.
Like I said, it helped to be young. And we recorded the thing, but we were, Dwight Carver was one of the mellophonium players. And by the way, a French horn player and a very good mellophonium player. He never showed up for the recording date. And there was, as always in those days, there was an audience and a lot of trumpet players. And Stan looked out and said, "Any of you guys interested in playing mellophonium on the band?" One guy said, "Yeah, I would love to." And he got hired and did the first 6-7 weeks of the tour. But yeah, it was a different era in those days, long before what we call networking today. You were on the phone calling your friends. Hey, such and such is leaving Woody's band, and such is going over to whatever. And that's how I managed to network my career in those days. And Stan, like I said, was one of the best, if not the best leader I could possibly have started out with. We did the last tour of England that I mentioned. He broke the band up because he was getting a divorce from his wife, Ann Richards, who was singer on the band earlier on. And he broke the band up. And so we didn't know what the future was. So unbeknownst to me, he called up Sam Donahue on the Tommy Dorsey band, who was leading that band at the time with Charlie Shavers, Helen Forrest, the Pied Pipers, and Frank Sinatra Jr. It was quite a package. And recommended me to the band. And he also called Stan Kenton and said, if you ever needed, not Stan Kenton, I'm sorry, Stan did the phone calls. He called up Harry James and said, if you ever need a lead trumpet player, call Tony. Well, they called my friend Tom, who was doing to join the band, and he was doing Funny Girl on Broadway. And of course, didn't want to leave that. It was becoming a big hit with Streisand. And so I get the call from Harry, and I got hired to play lead. And my audition was to fly into Reno, drive up to Lake Tahoe, sit in the first trumpet chair, and Harry stood in front of me for 4 sets. That's an audition. And
no pressure there.
Oh God! And Buddy Rich was playing drums. So
Wow.
before I played a note, I walked in, and the dressing room was upstairs above the lounge at Harrah's Tahoe. And Buddy's standing there by the roulette wheel, which was always in action because Harry played it before he went on stage, and Buddy just stood there. He said, "Hey kid, how you doing?" And I said, "Well, geez, I'm doing pretty good. I got this thing on my lip." "I didn't ask you how your lip was. I asked how you were doing," he says to me. I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting, dealing with Buddy. Well, that was his normal mode, I found out later. But I went up, introduced myself to Harry. He couldn't have been a nicer gentleman. He said, "You don't have the right kind of tie. Here, take mine," and gave me his tie. Went on the stand, and like I said, he sat in front of me or stood in front of me for 4 sets, and evidently I passed. But later on, Perello decided that he wanted to leave New York and come out and join the band. And Harry says to me, "Would you mind if Tommy joins the band?" I said, "No, we're friends." And he came out, and I said, "I'll just move over and sit next to Buddy." And I was playing a lot of the lead anyway, and that was fine with me. I never had those kind of ego problems at all. And sitting next to Buddy was, you played it. There was one way to play it, Buddy's way.
Right.
There was no room for variations on a theme with Buddy. I mean, it was locked. And, it was great because obviously he's amazing. No question about that. And he could take a 7-bar drum break and turn it around so fast, you better be beating your foot because you could lose. And you're coming in on 4-1. You could lose that one in a big hurry. So, but Buddy was cool. Buddy, I was the kid to him. And he, you remember Kent cigarettes?
Sure.
Well, Kent cigarettes is what Buddy smoked. And he took to standing out in the lobby. We worked at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas 16 weeks a year. And Buddy would stand out in the lobby like this. And I was supposed to come by and place a Kent cigarette in his fingers. And he would say to me every night, "I like you, kid." And then I would light it for him. It was this ongoing bit. So this, oh God, and Buddy, I ended up staying at his house more than I was staying in my apartment. He gave me his Weimaraner dog. I had a Jaguar XKE. He had one as well. And if you don't know some of the famous stories about Buddy not paying his bills, most of the cars were repossessed over the year. And he decided he wanted to buy my Jaguar because his Jaguar was gone. And I said, "Well, geez, Bud, I'll meet you. We're going up to Lake Tahoe, and Monday is our day off. I'll meet you over at Bank of America. You can give me a cashier's check, and I'll give you the title." "What do you mean, kid?" I says, "Buddy, I know you." "Oh, yeah, kid. I like you, kid." So he bought the car. I got my money, and that was it. I don't know how long he kept it. I left the band not that long later to go to Germany and join the WDR, Westdeutscher Rundfunk Big Band, which was quite a good jazz band led by a fellow by the name of Kurt Edelhagen. And Kurt was, he was a decent guy. I say that with reservation. And rest his soul because he's no longer with us. But Kurt, unbeknownst to me, again, I left Harry James's band. I flew to Germany. I took up residence in a top story over a doctor and his wife's house in Cologne. And I had arranged to shipped all my stuff over, and I had previously arranged, my stepfather had a 300 SL Mercedes Gullwing. And I had arranged with a Mercedes factory to have that car sent over and be restored at the factory. Now, sounds extravagant now, but in those days it was doable. So anyway, I go, and I go into the first night, Kurt picks me up at the airport, the leader, and we had a 10 o'clock session at the studios. They always did everything after hours. And I walk in, and this big, huge guy, and you know him, Milo Pavlovich.
Milo.
Milo, a big Yugoslavian guy. He comes up, he says, "Hello, my name is Milo. I am the first trumpet player." Which was nice to meet you too. He was leaving in 2 weeks, for God's sakes. He was going up to Berlin to play in the Rias big band. So anyway, I did my thing, and it was fine. I mean, we did few one-nighters and, a lot of recordings. We did a TV show that was kind of the equivalent of Ed Sullivan, but they never played anything live in Germany. Everything was pre-recorded. They left nothing to chance. So, we did all that stuff. And then finally, Kurt, I guess, mustered up the courage. He came over and he said, Tony, I must tell you, I was Horst Fischer, the great trumpet soloist from Germany. I mean, famous in Germany, but also famous drinker. And in Germany, if you get fired 3 times, 2 times, they'll give you a reprieve. 3 times, you're gone. Anyway, Kurt was banking on Horst being drunk while I was there. Well, of course, the minute I showed up, he was sober as a judge. And then Kurt tells me, he says, "Oh yeah, by the way, I've also hired Rick Kiefer to come up from Munich. I don't really need 5 trumpets in a 4-man section."
Right, Rick is a marvelous player.
Oh yeah, he's a great player and he's a good friend. But yeah, so anyway, I naturally was upset about it because I had left and moved lock, stock, and barrel over, And luckily, my stepfather missed the boat with his Mercedes Gullwing, and it didn't get sent to Germany. But I was starting to pick up freelance work in Cologne in the Francie Ballon Kenny Clark big band was there. And a lot of good stuff was going on. And, I probably could have stayed, but my phone rang and it's Buddy again, Buddy Ridge. He says, "I left Harry. I'm putting a band together in Las Vegas. I want you to be my lead trumpet player and come on back." So I said, "Great." He said, "We got 6 weeks of work at the Aladdin Hotel, which was relatively new, and 6-week option to renew the gig." Well, we rehearsed for about at least 6 weeks, I think. And Oliver Nelson, the great Oliver Nelson, brought a handful of charts in for Buddy. And unbeknownst to Buddy, they'd already been previously recorded by Jimmy Smith and Wes Montgomery. I went over to Buddy and I showed him the trumpet parts. And I said, "Bud, look at this. It says Snooky, Ernie, Clark, Markey. I mean, these have been recorded." Well, at that point, Buddy figured it out and Oliver left and he got a bunch of other good guys to write charts for the band. But we did do in that 6-week gig I was talking about. That was a 1-week gig with no option, no option to renew. So I'm parlaying my career on a phone, and I ended up at Hera's house band up in Reno, which was great, led by a nice guy by the name of George Hernandez, and it was a good gig. Now, I'm like 22 years old, and I wasn't quite ready for showbiz, as good as Debbie Reynolds and Donald O'Connor and those people were in those days. So I went up and I stayed. I was up there for a couple of years. And Buddy, of course, Bobby Shue was hanging out backstage all the time. And, I knew Bobby well. We played together quite a bit later on. And I said, "Buddy needs a lead player. You interested?" And he said, "Well, yeah." So Buddy hired him to go down to LA, and when they recorded, I think, the Live at the Shea or something like that. And then Chuck Finley came on the band later, and the band went on to the popularity that it truly deserved. But at that time, there was nothing on the horizon. And Buddy said to me when I said, "What, Bud? You lied to me. What's going on?" He says, "Well, I'm going to pay everybody $150 a week." "Well, you'll have to pay it back later on when we get work." I was like, No, at least keep your lead players on salary, for God's sakes. I mean, Sam Most was in the saxophone section. John Bunch was the piano player. I mean, this is a serious. Jimmy Tremble was playing first trombone. This was a seriously good band, and a lot of the guys left right away, obviously, and as did I. But when I was up in Reno for those 2 years at Harrah's in the house band, it was a good gig. Paid good money, and I had a nice little house out in the country, and it was terrific. And Harry's band was working still at Harrah's Lounges in Lake Tahoe and Reno. And naturally, I'd go and hang out with the guys and say hi to Harry and all that stuff. And by this point, Sonny Payne was playing drums. And so Harry said, "You want to come back on the band, kid?" Or Babes. He called everybody Babes. "Hey, Babes, you want to come back on the band?" I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "There's a fellow by the name of Bill King, who was a great lead player, was leaving the band. And he said, I want you to play lead." And I said, "Terrific." So this would be my second go around with Harry. And this time, I am playing lead, and we did the Sullivan Show like you talked about. Is that a good story to tell at this point?
I think it might be, yeah. Why don't you jump into that one?
I mean, everybody knows, and God knows, I thought Harry James walked on water. I mean, he was the best. Harry James, we get to the Ed Sullivan Show, which was billed as a tribute to Irving Berlin. Now, there sits Ethel Merman in the front row. I mean, all these people, and we got assigned, the producers gave Harry, they handed out the arrangement of Marie, the great Tommy Dorsey hit with Bunny Berrigan's trumpet solo. Well, at the noon rehearsal, Harry looks back at me, he says, "Catch my part, babes," and hands me his solo part, Bunny's solo. I said, well, I had been on the Dorsey band a few times and I played everything but the first trumpet part. So I wasn't like I was unfamiliar with Marie and the trumpet solo. And it was like voiced out for the 4 trumpets. So we rehearsed it, and Harry had a reputation for being quite a drinker. And he proceeded to drink his beloved Smirnoff Red Label. And he went through a lot between then and 6 p.m. showtime. So we get to the studio at 6, and I said, Harry, what part do you want me to play? "Catch my part, babes," he says to me. He stood in front of the band and ghosted. He didn't play a note. And everything you hear on that recording, you can find it on YouTube. Robert Goulet, Harry James, Marie, Ed Sullivan, 68. Harry didn't play a note. And it was me playing lead and the Bunny Berrigan solo. And Harry never said a word to me. Thank you. You sounded good. You didn't. I was happy with it, the way it sounded. The band played the hell out of it. I get back to my hotel room and my phone rings and it's Bud Brisbois. He said, "Tony, you played the hell out of that." I was like, it was that obvious, huh? He said, well, what's to Bud? Anyway, that was quite a compliment, especially coming from him. So at any rate, but Harry, I thought at the time, I was 22 years old. And at the time I thought, well, he's too drunk. Believe me when I tell you, Harry James could have played that upside down, backwards in his sleep. Believe me.
One of the greats of all time.
Certainly, Harry had recorded an Irving Berlin tune in the past. Why they assigned him Tommy Dorsey's one of his biggest hits with Bunny solo was really ridiculous. And Harry took offense at it, and he just wasn't going to do it. So at any rate, that was, and I tell you, when I say he could have played it backwards, upside down, a guy came up to us one night on a break. I'm standing with Harry on the side of the bandstand. The guy comes up and in kind of rather indignant way says, "Harry, why don't you play Carnival of Venice anymore?" Well, Harry takes his trumpet, turns it upside down, and goes like this. Says, "You mean like that, a-hole?" That's Harry James. Believe me,
wow.
he could do it. And
one of the greats of all time.
Oh, I tell you what. Yeah, no question. No question. And I got offended over the years when people say, "Oh, he wasn't a jazz player. That's some fancy trumpet playing, but it ain't jazz." Well, I'm here to tell you, he could rip through Cherokee and Flying Home and just about anything you want and play. Well, he listened. I said, "Who do you listen to at home, Harry?" He said, "Clifford Brown." That's who he preferred to listen to. God.
Not bad.
Oh, not bad at all. One night, Rafael Mendez came in to the front Flamingo to say hi to Harry. And I'm not going to miss this conversation. I am right there, Johnny, on the spot, like a fly on the wall. And they're comparing their respective recordings of Horace Staccato. And Mendez said, "How did you double tongue that?" Harry said, "I single tongue it. I don't double tongue anything." And Mendez went like, "What?" Yeah. And it was so matter of fact with Harry. I mean, he no pretense whatsoever.
Wow.
Never. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, after Harry, I left the band, like I said, to go to Germany, came back with Buddy, up to Harrah's, back with Harry's. And then I decided that I had enough. And I joined Frank Sinatra Jr.'s, at the time, had a small band, 7-piece band led by the great trombone player, Larry O'Brien. And Larry, went on to lead the Miller Band for 23 years. He's now retired, happy in Hawaii. Put his trombone in the closet, hasn't looked at it in several years, which is a shame because, boy, this guy could play. And on the Dorsey Band, he was the soloist playing all that beautiful Tommy Dorsey stuff. Yeah, Larry was something. But it was a hot little band, and Frank Jr. was pretty hot as well. And, tough reputation to follow his dad. I mean, come on. They expect you to sound like Sinatra Sr. Well, it wasn't happening with Junior then. He was a very good musician, and over the years became a very good singer. But at that time, he was my age, for God's sakes, in his early 20s, and he had all the mannerisms and all that stuff, and of course, he knew the music intimately. So we did a NBC TV special, which, by the way, just aired 2 weeks ago on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
Another one I haven't been paid for. Yeah, seriously. But at any rate, nothing against Netflix. I'm sure it'll get tracked down. I put our local 369 officials on it, so I know it'll get tracked down.
But at any
rate, it's a nice little thing. We were in the lounge of the Frontier Hotel. It was billed as Frank Sinatra Jr. and friends, family and friends. And of course, the old man was on it. Nancy and Tina made an appearance, and Milton Berle and Benny Goodman, not Benny Goodman, Jack Benny. And it was a lovely 1 hour show on NBC, sponsored by Monsanto. And Frank did a great job. He really did. And the segment, we're in the lounge on our performance, and Sinatra Senior's in the sitting ringside, of course. And he jumps up on stage, stands right in front of me, and the two of them do All or Nothing at All together. And Sinatra did his pratfall and a bunch of shtick, and it was really a good bit. So that segment has been played several times on different Sinatra Senior specials. But that was a good year, and we were on the road. Mary and I got married when I was still with Frank Jr., and we did, how many months were we on the road? It was, I think, maybe 8 months on the road. And a job offer came up in Las Vegas, because that's where I was living, obviously. And I was a member of the local, and I knew all the guys around town with what was called the Relief Band at that time, which meant every hotel, this is hard to believe in this day and age, every hotel had a house band of at least 13 to 17 people. And if we needed strings, they got hired each week. If we needed a harp, if you needed extra percussion, we just augmented the band. So I did that. I joined the band called the Johnny Haig. Good name for a band leader. If you don't know, that's a Scotch. Johnny Haig's real name was Haig Eschow. Good guy, straight shooter, never missed a payment, never missed any of the money you were owed, took care of the band. And we did 6 different hotels a week. Like Monday night would be at the Sahara. It would maybe Johnny Carson or Buddy Hackett or Sonny and Cher in those days. Tuesday night was the Lido du Paris at the Stardust. Wednesday night was the Casino du Paris at the Dunes. Thursday night he had 2 gigs on Thursday night, one at Caesars, one at the Hilton. So I would get sent over to the Hilton generally, where I'd play Tony Bennett or Streisand or Liberace a lot. And the other guys would go over to Caesar's Palace and play who was ever there. And then Friday night, the hotel doesn't exist anymore, called the Landmark. And they were famous for country and Western shows. And I played Roy Clark a lot and Bobby Gentry and people like that. Saturday night was theoretically our night off, but Haig always booked a party on Saturday night. And then Sunday night was the Sands. And, it was great money. The band paid the equivalent of time and a half scale, because you had to rehearse that day, play that night. I mean, you had to be very good readers and able to come in and play the music. So, and the Relief Band had a reputation for being one of the best, if not the best, in Las Vegas. So, in addition to working 7 days a week, I'm doubling or tripling, and I'm getting called to play in the lounge with either like Harry James, who I'd left the band, Vic Damone, Buddy Greco, Ray Anthony, in the lounge. And you go in, you play the first show at 8 o'clock in the showroom, run over to the lounge to do the 10 o'clock show, go back to the showroom and play the 12 o'clock show, back to the lounge and play the 2 a.m. show in the lounge, get up at 7 in the morning and go down to the convention center and do a production show for, like, Chevrolet's introducing their new cars, or one big corporation after another, with full big time production shows with casts of thousands of dancers, musicians, and yeah, they were big deals. And so I'm like, for 4 years, I'm doing triple work. I was like, man, how long's this been going on? So wow. We're not dumb. We saved our money and managed to go do what little traveling we could do when we could do it, because Mary was working full time as a photo technician. And she, she was working, I was working, and those days in Las Vegas, she'd get done work about 2 a.m, and I'd get done, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'd hook up and go see Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders at the Flamingo, which was smoking. I mean, smoking. And it was routine for us to get home at 5, 6 in the morning, and we'd stop on the way and shop for groceries, and then sleep and get up in the mid-afternoon. And usually had a rehearsal, but I had time to do other things, which mainly was restoring cars in those years. So, yeah, life wasn't bad, and continued
Fantastic.
to get better until Las Vegas decided they didn't need house bands anymore, and the acts that I used to work with, huge orchestras, would start coming in with self-contained with 3 keyboards and a rhythm section.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's basically what's going on. And they don't work 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time anymore. They come in for 1 or 2 nights when they're not coming in at all right now because of this pandemic. But yeah, it was very good years to be in Las Vegas. And when that sort of went away, I was, the hotel I was working at for the last 9 years, well, 15 years actually, the last 9 of which were with Siegfried and Roy. And which was extremely popular show with all the animals and all that stuff. And I was the band, not manager, but contractor, and I was playing first trumpet. I took care of all the business, and we made a lot of money because I had the inroads with the arranger. And I said, well, we all play flugelhorns, we all play piccolo trumpet, we play percussion instruments. So we all had doubles, which paid extra, and saxophone same way. Trombones, yeah, they had doubles too. So we were doing all right. That was hard work, I must say. Playing first trumpet on Buddy Rich's band and playing first trumpet for Siegfried and Roy was harder.
Wow.
It was brutal. And we did first 8 months, we did 3 shows a night. And it was like an hour and 45 on your face. You just didn't take it off. And it was, I used to go down in the band room about 2 hours before the gig and sit there and play pedal tones on my flugelhorn just to get something going. And then I'd finally get a resemblance of a sound and some air moving, and then I'd segue into the trumpet. But like I said, it paid good. It was music by the pound, never changed. But it was what it was, So when they left Frontier Hotel, their manager called me aside. This is closing night after 8 years. He says, Tony, come here. I want to talk to you. Now, the hotel had been sold. He calls me over and he says, when we come back to Las Vegas, we're going to revolutionize show business. And it won't include live musicians. Now, was that an offensive comment to make to me?
I would think so.
I told him if I had a baseball bat, it would end up in where the sun don't shine, and walked out. I mean, the guy was not a good guy. Well, they put the music on a CD, recorded it in L.A., and went to Japan for a year, and came back at the Mirage until Roy got bitten by the tiger. They had this successful run going with a CD player. So at any rate, now what am I going to do now? I'm freelancing. And one of the shows that put me over the edge, why am I doing this? I'm practicing very hard to stay in shape, getting work, what little was around. And I was doing a show called Nudes on Ice, which effectively was called Cellulite on Ice. Yeah. And I did that for the run and decided that, you know what, I'm also a photographer. My wife is a photographer. She had been freelancing and getting some pretty good contracts with the likes of Citibank and people like that. And so she took a steady job, a real job, working in a very high profile scientific lab, and started passing me her gigs. And so I segued that in, and over a period of a couple of years, I basically didn't play. And that was a mistake. Believe me, that was a mistake. Don't do it. Don't do it. But I did. And as luck would have it, Doc Severinsen was an old friend from the early Getson days. And I lived 30 miles from the Getson factory in Elkhorn. So I was over there all the time, especially when I was out with Harry. And of course, Doc liked Harry, idolized Harry. And we'd talk about that and this and that. And we'd go over and test trumpets together. And whenever we were in New York, I'd go up and see him at the Tonight Show, or I'd see him walking down the street after the show and all that stuff. So anyway, Doc kept calling. He says, the show is off the air. This was 1992. And I'm going to take the big band out. I'd like you to go out with the band. I said, geez, Doc, I haven't played in 2 years. I certainly wouldn't do it to you, and wouldn't do it to myself. He said, fine. He kept calling, and I did some photography for him with his original, the bel canto trumpets that he and Dick Ackroyd were doing. And I did other things, and I would always see him when he was in town. And little by little by little, he kept calling, and he said, all right, here's the deal. Conti Condoli is not going to make the next trip. He's going to be in Italy. You're coming out and play second. I'm giving you 3 months to get in shape. Fair enough. Well, I did, and we did. We went on this tour back east, and one of the things we did was Regis and Kathy Lee ABC show. And Tom DeLibero, the great lead trumpet player, and Snooky Young and Dennis Tribuzzi was the section, and great section, of course. And it was a little nervous for me. Everything came out okay, but it felt like every note was an adventure. After 2 years, I wasn't in as good a shape as I should have been or could have been, I'm sure. But anyway, Doc kept calling. I'd sub for Snooky or I'd sub for Count. And this one time he says, we got New Year's Eve in Phoenix. Tom DeLibero can't make the gig. You're playing lead. Well, at this point, it's been a couple of years, and I'm feeling good again about my chops. And we went down to, of all places, an Indian casino in Phoenix. And I looked at this joint. It's got like imitation grass on the floor and folding seats. I said, I come from the land of decadent casinos. What am I doing in this toilet? I mean, it was terrible. Well, Doc was Pop's conductor with the Phoenix Symphony, and it turned out to be, it was a fundraiser for them. So we did the rehearsal, did the show, and Conti came in, and we had years ago we had done that Artistry and Bossa Nova recording with Kenton together in 1963. And Count was in the trumpet section, but I didn't have the nerve to go up and introduce myself and say hello and tell him how much I idolized him. But at any rate, I went up to him this time and I said, I told him about that recording, which of course he didn't remember. And I said, I'm glad that we're going to be able to work together. So we played the rehearsal, and he leans over to me. He says, you trying to steal my gig?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a good compliment from him.
Wow.
And Snooky wasn't sure about me. He wasn't sure about me. The first thing he said, where's Tom? He got uncomfortable with Tom, naturally, he's a great player. And I said, well, Tom's got another gig tonight he couldn't get out of. Okay, so we played the rehearsal, and then I could see Snooky warming up. So there was he was a very cool guy. And little by little by little, we became very, very close friends. And as his health deteriorated, primarily his hearing, I would go out on the band and sit next to him and literally play his parts. His microphone was never turned on. He had such bad problems with his inner ear, dizziness, and hearing. He had earphones in his own volume control that when I tell you it was painful, I put them on one time. It was painful. That was that loud. Wow. And he couldn't tell, just couldn't tell. So anyway, he didn't get wise to it. He just thought I was there playing whatever. And I got to tell you this story. Doc's been married 3 times, and we're playing in oh my God, Phoenix. No, we're playing in Fort Worth, Texas. Sorry.
Okay.
Give me a moment. And I'm walking in with Snooky, and we're going into the hall, and this really lovely lady, middle-aged, blonde, real pretty. She comes up, gives Snooky a hug. Oh, Snooky, so good to see you. Goes right into Doc's dressing room. Snooky says to me, who the hell was that? And I said, well, that's Doc's second wife, Yvonne. Oh. He said, hell, he wished she was dead. I guess there's been a lot of alimony paid since 1965 over the years.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So anyway, she was there all week, man, and she was in Doc's place the whole week. But yeah, and after the big band stuff that we did, and I got where it was, Snooky was so comfortable with me. My favorite saying from him to me, I'd get on the bus, and I was always early, and Snooky was even earlier, and he was dap. He was a sharp guy. I'd walk on the bus and he'd look at me and he'd say, "You the sharpest cat on the bus." And I said, "That's pretty cool coming from you, Snooks." Yeah. We'd go out to dinner. He loved ribs. I said, "What you going to have, Snooks?" "Well, I'm going to have a whole octave." Oh,
That's great.
Mary was with us down in Scottsdale, and we went to a great restaurant. And he looked at the menu and he said, the waitress, "What do you have, sir?" And he says, "I'll have the crab Callaway." You know, musician humor. Of course, she didn't get it, but yes, he was such a sweetheart. And when he died, it was it was a drag. I got a nice note from his daughter thanking me for our friendship, and it was pretty nice. So, but yeah, all those years after that, I started going out and doing gigs on my own. I generated. I'm big in Wisconsin. You got to understand that. Can't get arrested anywhere else, but all these years, it allowed me time to go back and start working on one of my pet loves. These things.
Trumpets.
And Ray Amato, the great Ray Amato, and I were close friends. He built me, I don't know if you know, he innovated the original jet tone mouthpieces. That was his idea. And he loved Harry James, as do I. And Harry played the Parduba double cup. So the jet tone concept was based on a modified double cup situation or design. And he had a partner. And Ray, like I said, Ray built me my mouthpiece, my jet tone, 1968. And he was a sweet guy, taught me a lot. Smart guy. He had a medical lab that did analysis of blood and all the stuff that you do when you get a physical, and loved to play the trumpet. It was a good amateur and always wanted to build a better mousetrap. So came up with this jet tone concept, and it was quite successful. I mean, no less than Buddy Morrow, Doc Severinsen, Irby Green, Snooky Young, Mel Davis, all the heavyweight cats in New York City were playing jet tones at that time, and Maynard, of course. So at any rate, he found out his partner was kind of rifling the till and money was disappearing. So Ray said, "That's it, I'm out of here." And jet tone was never the same after Ray left. But then he got an idea to build a really great trumpet using Getson parts. And his idea was, he said, "These horns play great, but they don't look as good as they play." So he wanted, and Sandy Sandberg was our dear friend who was the guy head of sales for Getson in those years. He got Doc on board originally. When he left to go to LeBlanc, he got Al Hurt, Pete Fountain, Maynard, Miles, those kind of guys. That's what kind of clout that Sandy had. Well, anyway, he arranged to have 2 sets of parts sent out to Ray, Getson stock parts, and Ray refashioned these parts and put them together, taught himself how to engrave over a period of 2 years, built this beautiful, based on the Eterna, and elaborately engraved. And Ray always told me, I went crazy with the engraving, but once I learned how, I couldn't stop. Had it gold plated and then lacquered over the gold to protect the gold, and proudly took it down to New York City to the NBC studios in 1968 to give to Doc. And Doc grabbed it and played 30 seconds on it and said, "Yeah, that's great," and gave it back to Ray. Ray never could understand why he didn't keep it. And I never could get Doc to answer that question either. But years later, I'm playing a concert in Wisconsin, and totally unbeknownst to me, Ray had he had set the scenario up to present me with this trumpet, the Amato 1 Doc Severinsen engraved on the bell, Doc Severinsen signature, to me, because he and I had been working with Don Getson at DEG, and Ray did some work for Getson. I think they were called Renaissance trumpets in those years. Mm-hmm. And Ray knew what he was doing. And like I said, he nursed me along with what I know, thanks to him. And this trumpet came to me on, right before we took a break. And man, to say I lost it was an understatement, because at this point, Ray was laying in a hospital awaiting a heart transplant. And for all I knew, he wasn't going to live. And he presented this horn to me as a special gift from a dear friend. I couldn't play a note. So we took a break and came back, and I pulled up Trumpet Blues and I played it on that horn. And I didn't know it was being recorded, but his son, Bill, is a heart surgeon. And Bill told me later, Ray was laying in his hospital bed in tears, just streaming down his face, listening to this recording. That made it worthwhile. Well, he went on to live another 4 years, and he and I worked on a lot of projects together. And yeah, like I said, he taught me a lot, taught me a lot. My horns, that's basically was 1988. I started making my own horns after doing all those DEGs, which unfortunately doesn't even exist anymore. Mark Schaefer had sold the company and closed the door. They're not around. But when Don Getson had it, he was interested in doing a line of professional trumpets. So I got in touch with him. He and I worked on the complete line. They were called Signature 2000s. The B flats, the C's, the E flats, the cornets, the piccolo, and the flugelhorn, which is basically the design I use to this day on my own Scodwell flugelhorn. But the piccolo was being shown at an ITG in London that year, and no less than William Vacchiano walked over, picked it up, and played on it, and asked if he could endorse it. How cool is that? So
wow.
I got this beautiful letter down in my studio that Vacchiano sent to Don Getson, telling him how he loved this horn. He was going to tell all his students, blah, 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 the ergonomics of the valve offset and all that stuff. It's pretty cool. And they made 150 total. That's all. Yeah. So they never were around, but I tell you, if anybody sees one, it's a good one to look for. DEG Signature 2000.
Right. Okay.
Only used. But that's so anyway, after seeing a lot of the production problems on the DEG horns, quality control was not Don's fault as being where they were being made. And it was suspect, to say the least. And in spite of that, they played really good. The design was good. And I decided if I ever wanted to do this and have the horns play the way I need them to play, I better build them myself. So I started out and I started making horns. I made one model only. And in those years, I didn't even have my name on them. I thought, I don't know why. I was probably dumb in hindsight, but no one, it was blank. There was nothing on it but the serial number. And finally, I smarted it up a little bit and I had my name stamped on the second valve casing. I always thought Schilke did a nice job with that very discreet little stamp on the valve casing. And that's kind of what I wanted to copy. So my little Scodwell USA emblem on the valve casing, that's all it's on my horns. Some have been engraved for special occasions. Like I did 4 25th anniversary models when it dawned on me that I've been doing this for 25 years. And I probably should do a 25th anniversary
horn. Right.
So I did 4 of them, 25th anniversary, quarterly, silver plated, obviously silver anniversary, engraved 25 years and 25th anniversary on the bell. Basically my standard trumpet, but with a few doodads and flourishes. And again, geez, you were with me at ITG, and it was, that godforsaken Indian casino up in Pennsylvania.
King of Prussia.
Yeah, that's it. Some guy came by, and the last of the 4 25th anniversaries was laying on my counter. And this guy came by with a big gig bag, and bammo, it hit the floor and folded the bell back.
I remember.
Well, I'm like, oh, and the guy never fessed up to it. He took off, and never knew who did it. So anyway, I took it home, and I said, well, I can roll the bell out, but it kind of marred the silver. And I said, do I want to get it silver plated again? I started playing on it. And the more I played on it, and I said, I'm keeping this. Anybody deserves one, it's me. So I sold the one that I've been playing for years and kept this 25th anniversary one. And that's the one I got today. It's the one I play, and I love it. Again, it's basically my standard model. And I'll show you a standard model. Well, you know what they are. This one happens to be in the brush lacquer finish. And it's got a lot of guys who play my horn for the first time say, the lead pipe's longer. When I put it up, I kind of hit my face. And I said, well, you're right. It is longer on purpose. It's cut off up here. The Venturi, for me, is what I want. A little bit bigger than what the manufacturers generally use. The overall length is longer. And I put down here, and Vincent Bach did it. There's no secret here. You may remember the Bessons The Bessons had a ferrule and then an inner tubing and then the slide.
Right.
Well, that effectively just covered up that inner tubing with the outer slide, which I've done. But rest assured, that spacer is in there for a very important reason. And fit and finish, of course, I'm the only guy making them. Fit and finish is pretty tight. And this brush finish has become quite popular. I still do raw brass. That's pretty much the standard Scodwell. And the brush finish, and I did kind of a serendipitous mistake, I will admit. I sent a horn to Anderson's for silver. Came back bright, bright, bright silver. Beautiful, as they do. Except there was a big scratch right here and a big scratch right here that inadvertently I left. I didn't get it. I didn't see it. My eyes ain't what they used to be, as the song says in D flat. But nonetheless, I said, well, you know what? The brush finish is a very easy process. Involves not much ingenuity, a 3M industrial Scotch Brite pad. So I thought, well, what happens if I brush finish this trumpet and then clear lacquer it? And it's kind of a cool look, don't you think?
Absolutely. Great look.
And Mary calls it a vintage retro look. And I think that's a good name for it. And then as long as I'm talking about different models, I basically make two. The standard Las Vegas model, and it's got a lot of pizzazz. It's got a lot of vibrance. Boy, does it project. I never put a brace up here, ever. And my feeling is when I place this brace down here, it can go from anywhere all over the place, depending on where that sweet spot is, like a bridge in a violin. So anyway, I sent my standard horns down to LA to a good friend of mine, Charlie Davis. And he was doing a session with Warren Looning at the time, Chuck Finley, and Gary Grant. And they all said, man, this horn plays. It's got it, really goes, and it really is in tune. It's all, all the raves. They said, but in our environment, we need a bit rounder sound quality. So this is why the Boston was born. I decided, first of all, a rose brass bell, sterling silver lead pipe, with my openings and length, these kind of little harmonic balancers on the first and third slide, which I don't always fit, by the way. I test play the horn, and if I think it needs it, they get it. And do not anneal the bell. I anneal my standard model bells, which are yellow brass, at a specific time and temperature, which really changes the way they project and light up. I mean, they really does. A lot of guys say cryogenic is the way to go. That's the opposite of heat treating, And I think what I'm onto is good. I do the bells one at a time, and I've got a special oven for that. And they come out, and they're not real pretty, I must say. And I clean them up in muriatic acid solution in water and dip them and pickle them, get them clean. And then solder the beads, because you don't want to anneal them with the bead solder because it'll crystallize the solder. And then start buffing and clean them up. And at the moment, I've got about 50 hanging on my shop. Each valve section has completed. Lead pipe, valves, everything but the braces. I got the ferrule to stick the bell in. I start sticking bells in and playing them until I find one that's simpatico with the valve section and lead pipe. And that bell gets mounted up. Only in the rear first, the Z brace by your face, down between the valve, first valve section and the bell. And then I place the one out front, out here, I have a piece of heavy metal, and I'll move it while I'm playing. And where that sweet spot, and it sounds like voodoo, but I've had as many as 6 really good trumpet players over in my shop blindfolded, and we've all achieved the same spot with that method across the room at each other. So it really does work. And factories can't do that. I mean, they don't have the time to do that. Their horns are built to a theme, basically. Like Vincent Bach said, this is where the brace should be. That's where they should be. And, they play pretty damn good, no question about it. But I think, that's a little advantage for me in that I can play the horns as well as make them. And on that, I got to tell you a quick one. When I was in high school, my dad, being a smart guy, he said, this trumpet thing and the music thing might not work out. I hadn't got my scholarship to Berkeley yet or anything. And I had planned on going down to Chicago and studying with Arnold Jacobs, the great tuba player with the orchestra, because Bud Herseth wouldn't teach the likes of me. And he said, go down to this. There's a big company that makes paper making machinery in my hometown, the Beloit Corporation at the time. He said, take their aptitude test and see what happened. Because I was building my own go-karts and racing them, and I was mechanically tuned in. So anyway, I took the test. It came back, the results. It said, you're qualified for two things: working with metal and music. How cool is that? So
you found your niche.
Well, I guess it's serendipitous, but it sure did work. And I love making my horns. I go down and work in my shop. I have a lovely shop. It's just me. I go down, and this pandemic is, it's not all bad. I've used the time to my advantage to build horns and stockpile them. I've got 3 Herald trumpets out right at the moment for silver plating at Anderson's. I've got 2 down to LA to be lacquered and brush lacquered. Mm-hmm. So, and I've still got 12 on the shelf. So I'm doing what I've been wanting to do for years, but thanks to you, Lee, I build one and you sell it. So I can never get ahead.
I'm doing my best.
Well, you're real good at it, by the way.
Well, so thank you.
I'm ahead of the game now, and I've got stuff. And you put me onto this fellow who wanted a bugle. He wanted to play taps at veterans' funerals, which I thought was totally cool. And he hadn't played in I don't know how many years, but he was enamored with a certain bugle. And you suggested he go on my website, scodwellusa.com, and which he did. And he called you back and said, I'd like Tony to build me a bugle. So I made him one, and I took a few leeways with the designs that were out there. And I made, I don't know why to this day. Can you tell me why bugles are pitched in G?
I have no idea.
Does that go back to the Civil War or something?
It could be. I have no idea. I don't know the history.
Anyway, he wanted it in B flat with a slide to G. Mm-hmm. So they are, to this day, the Rexford bugle, Regulation Army bugle, is
Rexcraft.
Rexcraft is pitched in G. So I made my version of it with a rather, I say myself, a really cool G slide that pull the tuning slide out, put the G slide in, and you're in G. And it blows like a real trumpet. So this guy was happy as a clam. And I thought, well, I know there's not a huge market for that, but I built another one just because I had the spare time, and it's sitting down there. And you, of all people, when I first proposed this horn, I dubbed my Euro flugelhorn. Now, I did this design in the early 60s for Getson. It was intended to be a very good playing, inexpensive flugelhorn in their Capri line, which it was, and it was in the catalog up until last year. And it sounds proper. The bell is correct. The lead pipe is correct, but it uses trumpet valves, obviously. And as much as you know, Lee, about the music business, and you do, he said, all those horizontal valves, nobody's going to want them. So I sent you one on speculation. Darn if you didn't sell it the first week.
3 days.
Yeah. And then 2, and then 3, and I'm on, he just sold number 5. So it's a proper horn. It does not play like 460, which these valves are. It plays like a small bore flugelhorn. The balance is beautiful, the intonation's impeccable, and the sound is right. So it's out there in the market for, what are they, like $12.95 or something?
Well, with the case, $13.95, and a case and a mouthpiece are included.
So I mean, it's nowadays, trumpet players notoriously have always thought of flugelhorn as a doubling instrument, never one that was going to be primary. Some guys have, like Claudio Roditi and Clark Terry, of course. Those kind of guys really, and Art Farmer, they played the flugelhorn. And I do. I love the flugelhorn. I consider it a second primary instrument. But a lot of guys used it in the days when you could get paid for a double. They just wanted something to pick up an extra $100 or whatever. So that hence the reason for an inexpensive flugelhorn, but plays in tune with the right sound. So I think we're onto something with that,
Oh, I definitely think so, Tony. It sounds marvelous. The pitch is great. Instruments at that price point generally don't play that well in tune, and your horn hits the target without question.
Well, I appreciate that, Lee, and the guys who have come in and played it have relayed that to me. Sometimes the guys who bought them, and they've been very complimentary. And it does play well. And in this day and age, money's tight. A lot of guys don't have any jobs. The musicians that I know,
right?
So let's give them something they can afford that really does play good and fills the bill.
Right. One last thing I'd like to show. We happen to have here, in honor of the great Dizzy Gillespie, a horn with an upturned bell, but it has a very unique design to it. The bell actually unscrews, so it fits into a normal size case. So that comes apart like that, and to put it together, just threads back on. And this is a marvelous trumpet. First quality stuff, and it allows the bell to be pointed upwards, so you play just like Dizzy. In stock right now in silver plate. Yeah, and it plays. It's based on my standard trumpet with a few things, because I basically I wanted to make it look like the one Dizzy played. And does that one have the tuning ring on the bottom? Yes, it does. Yeah. Yes, it does.
That was the way Dizzy's Martin was in the old days. So right. And since I've changed it, because a lot of guys nowadays don't want that. They want it on top where they're used to. So I put it back on the top. But those are special order, and I love making them. The hardware is ingenious. Cancel made that, by the way, the hardware for that, for his the
bell ring.
Yeah, the bell that they made, piccolo with 3 bells. So it was a natural, and it worked beautiful, and still does, of course. So yeah, Dizzy and the Herald trumpets. The Herald trumpets, it's a small market, but I figured, what the heck? I got enough parts to make a dozen of them, and I've got 4 now that are going to be on the shelf. You have one there, I think.
I have one right here. It's beautiful. If you hold on a second, I'll show it.
They play, they play like a real trumpet, although you're a bit distant from the sound naturally. But it blows like my trumpet, as does the Dizzy. Well, the Dizzy horn helps to have a low feeling. The sound just takes off. But the Herald trumpets are, there's a use for them. I mean, fanfares, military bands, of course. And mine is
there we go.
Yeah. That's an L&M. That's a long mother.
It sure is, that's for sure. And this too has a detachable bell. It fits into a standard size case, or a little bit slightly elongated case. And you also have the rings here that you can attach a banner on. So if you're doing the Pimlico horse races or the Kentucky Derby, Belmont Stakes, you're ready to go.
Well, again, I cannot tell these guys who are listening and watching enough. When you and I first met years ago through our mutual friend Everett Longstreth, who was kind enough to put you on to me.
That's right.
And Everett was, to this day, a dear friend and the great lead trumpet player and one of my teachers at Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And, we stay in contact all the time. And he too knows you're a virtuoso in what you do, as well as a damn good trumpet player, by the way.
Well, thank you.
People, here's a guy I'm going to brag about Lee a little bit. Here's a guy who picked out the trumpets for the Boston Symphony.
Right.
New York Philharmonic. He picks them out. And our good friend Larry Jess, who's principal player up in Spokane, incredibly gifted principal trumpet player. Unfortunately, like all the orchestras, he's at home watching. I hope he's watching anyway. Hi, Larry, if you are.
Hey, Larry.
You and Carolyn. He is, there's irony in everything. Now, I said earlier, the Boston model was intended for the studio symphonic players who want a rounder sound. Larry plays my standard Las Vegas model. And truthfully, I think he likes to terrorize the string section.
I think you're right.
But he plays that horn, and I've heard it in Pop's context. And when he needs to be flat for other things, he's marvelous. I mean, he's a guy. He's bald like me, by the way. And we like to think bald guys play better.
Yeah, we do, I think.
Anyway, so yeah, there was a fella, Bobby Burns Jr. This is like the ironic part of this whole game. again, my Boston model was intended for symphonic or studio players with this rounder sound quality. Bobby Burns Jr., when he was playing my horns with Earth, Wind, and Fire, preferred the Boston.
I remember.
So, yeah, and of course, he's some kind of trumpet player. So at any rate, you never know. And I used to make a model called the Gabriele, but with gold being so difficult and not to mention expensive, inside the bell, all the gold trim and all that stuff, it just got cost ineffective for me to do it. And I would make another one, but it would have to be based on the price of gold, which of course, as we know, is $2,000 and up now. So at any rate, I got to show you one more. I told you how much I loved Harry James. Okay. This is based on Harry's King. Now, he played Selmer trumpets for years, the balanced, very elongated like Louis Armstrong. So his King was based on the Symphony, Super Symphony Silversonic, Super 20 Symphonic. And it was dual bore, 464, 468, with a little longer tail section on the bell. They were only made for Harry. The bells were only used by Harry. Sterling silver lead pipes with a balanced action. So Harry gave me one of his Kings in 1968, and I've owned it for years, and I've copied it as best I can. Now, granted, I couldn't get a silver bell from anywhere. You can get the plated up bells, and I probably, in hindsight, maybe I'll do that on the next one. But I put a brass bell on it, this one, and it blows like you would expect Harry's horn to play. Wide open, a lot of life, and it's actually improves your posture because of the balanced action. When you hum, it really does.
Sure,
So,
I can see it.
I don't know if that was one of the reasons Harry played it. I think he loved Louis Armstrong, so I think mainly because Louis was playing one, Harry played one. And of course, a lot of great trumpet players in those days were playing that balanced model. I think Ziggy Elman played one.
Right.
Zuma, 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 zuma. Oh, Muddy. Oh, Muddy. Louis Prima.
Louis Prima
played one as well. And yeah, they were, and Selmer stopped making that model, I think, when the K modifieds in the 50s. And Louis was still playing one till he died. But, well, they don't make brass instruments at all anymore. So,
right.
But I have a 1939 balanced Selmer 24B, which I treasure. It's a great horn, plays great. Now, does it play as good as mine? Truthfully, I can say no, because the metallurgy in those days and the machining wasn't up to the CNC stuff that we've got today, where fit and finish on valves and slides make trumpets play better and respond better, certainly in the low register. And the valves are tighter, everything about them. So the horns play with a lot more precision nowadays. And there's a lot of good horns out there on the market. I mean, a lot of them. So what else you want to ask me? I'm here.
Well, I think our viewers have questions, so maybe we can find one and answer it.
Let me try and find some, guys. That was a wild ride. Kurt Williamson asked, who has the most skills out of all the fabulous musicians you've played with?
Trumpet players or just musicians?
You take it as you will.
Well, naturally, I'm sympathetic to trumpet players. Maynard Ferguson, off the top of my head, is not of this earth. I mean, it's certainly not along anymore. But when Bud Hurst has said this guy's the greatest trumpet player in the world, you got to believe he knows something.
Right.
And Maynard, I had the pleasure. Well, I damn near joined the band in 1963. Nat Pavone, the great lead trumpet player, had left the band and went with Basie. And I sat with Maynard upstairs in Birdland between sets, and I had the gig. And I was all set to go on the band. And, man, I was ready, because at that time, Maynard was eating raw meat. He was, I mean, there was no end to what he could do. And I used to go hear the band every chance I got. And at Sunnybrook Ballroom, the great Wally Hyder, recording engineer, gave me his tapes from the masters of Maynard playing at Sunnybrook. 4 sets. The very last tune of the 4th set, Maynard played Hey There. Now, if you've heard the recording, the band plays da da dee da 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 do da wee da 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 ba do do wee da do da dee da da do 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 dee. And Maynard would play ba wee do 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 double C to an F above the staff. He did 4 encores on that night and put a quadrissimo F above double C on the last encore.
I have this recording, which you gave to me. It's fabulous.
Now,
one of my prized possessions.
There's a lot of guys out there and a lot of guys with chops. I mean, all over the place that can do a lot of notes. But Maynard had a lot more going than just the notes,
Oh, without question.
There's a few guys out there, James Morrison, John Faddis. Those guys can do that all night long and astound you. And there's not many who could stand in front of a big band and do what Maynard did in his prime.
Right.
And
agreed.
So, that said, naturally, Doc Severinsen, amazing trumpet player. But I'll tell you an interesting tidbit about Doc, and I was his road manager for about 6-7 years. Played first trumpet for him at all his pop concerts. He left nothing to chance. Nothing. He would be in the stairwell 4 hours before the gig, beating his foot, playing what he's going to play on stage, full duration, in tempo. And if he wouldn't hit the stage. He told me one time, I don't go on stage until I felt like I've played and I'm working on the last set. That's what he wants to stop. Yeah, he's crazy, Superman. And he did stuff over the years, unreal. Now, if I have to pick one, it's going to be Harry James. Harry would come out on the stage at the Flamingo Hotel after it's 4 a.m. set, 10, 2, and 4 sets we did. He would come out and sit with Buddy Rich, Jack Percival on piano, Red Kelly on bass. He'd play How Deep is the Ocean or Lush Life, make you cry. And he's been up all night drinking and chasing women. I mean, that was what he did. But you would never know it. You would not know it. And not until a couple of years before he died did the heavy drinking start to affect him. But Harry James, he had more technique. I always say Harry played everything from here. Most guys play from here. And did I ever hear him warm up? No. Never. He'd be up in his dressing room. The first song we play every night was called The Mole. It was his nickname for one of his band boys years ago. The Mole. Where's the Mole? Oh, he's hiding out somewhere. And so great arrangement called The Mole. And he'd be upstairs listening. And I was told by a great guy, Nick Bono, who was on the band in 1939, Harry's first band. And he was on every band until he left in 1972. And Nick told me, he said, you better have the phrasing right on The Mole, because Harry's going to be listening to it upstairs before he hits the stage. And if you're not going, if you don't phrase it that way, see you later.
Wow.
And there were certain things, Harry, you had to do. It's just like being on the Glenn Miller band. You don't mess with the solos that were recorded. You don't mess with them. You play them as written, as recorded.
Right.
You don't mess with that. Anyway, Nick Bono.
Pure artistry.
Nick Bono gave me that advice. And one other piece of advice that I'll go back to Berkeley when I joined out there with the great Herb Pomeroy. He looks at the back of, and I'm in, the top band, the recording band, because of my scholarship and all that. He says, which one of you guys plays lead? Held my hand up. He says, what's your range, kid? Got an F. Okay. Our friend Everett Longstreth had written an arrangement, Lee knows what I'm talking about, called Wolifant's Lament.
Yeah.
In F for the trumpet key. The first note you play is a high F. We da do 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 da dee da da do da da F shake. 65 high F's in that chart. Well, being a smart ass kid, I crashed on the first page. And I would go back to Boston quite a bit on my travels, and I go over to Berkeley, say hi to Herb, and he never said a thing. He'd look at me and say, "Got an F, kid?" And that's a life lesson I've relayed to every kid I come in touch with. I said, don't promise something you can't deliver on the fourth set of the evening.
That's right. Good one.
Because it'll bite you. It will come back and bite you. You know.
I think there's a question there from Dave Norman.
Oh yeah, Dave. I haven't talked to Dave in a long time. What's he saying? I'm not getting them. Oh, they're there. Oh, geez.
So Dave asks, ever work with Charlie Turner in Vegas?
I did.
Lou Elias Relief Band?
I sure did. With Lou Elias and when he was traveling with Sinatra, Charlie, we call him Charlie Tuna. When Charlie would come in, and he was a lot of things, but he was primarily a great lead trumpet player. And he wasn't like hooked on drugs or anything, but he was a hypochondriac, and he had a tackle box that he would open up in front of him on the stand, and there was like 10 million vitamins and whatever in the case. And Charlie, when he left Sinatra, I think he recorded the Trilogy album. He did quite a few really monumental recordings with Sinatra, but he didn't get along with Irv Kotler, the drummer. And Irv, Charlie would do things like when Irv at the end of a piece, it'd go like bam, bam, and Irv would go boom, ba, ba, cha, bam. Well, Charlie got to dropping his mutes, boom, bang, boom, bang, boom. And Irv's wife is Sicilian. Sinatra, of course, is Sicilian, and it's a very tight group. And Irv made sure Charlie wasn't around after that. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and Charlie ended up down. I think he went to Jacksonville, and I don't know what happened. The last thing I heard from him was a general email. He was selling all his horns, and he had stopped playing. And it seemed like it was serious financial problems, but I don't understand why, because he made great dough his whole life. But anyway, yeah, I have worked, Dave. I have worked with Charlie, and he was everything you heard about him. A monster lead player. Style, sound, pitch, notes, yeah, all of it.
Great. Any more questions?
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Richard Kessler, hey.
Richard.
Hey,
we have a new flugelhorn coming out. When do you think it'll become available?
It's a good question, Richard. I've built the prototype. I'm awaiting, because of the pandemic, and I'm sourcing the parts from Carol Brass in Taiwan. And they, like everyone else in the world, and probably even more so because of their ongoing Chinese-Taiwan feud, the World Health Organization doesn't recognize Taiwan. The Taiwan government is coming out of same kind of lockdown that we've been in. So the factory, Carol Brass factory, has been not dormant, but shut way down. So my flugelhorn, to answer your question, is I've been told I could have got some this month, but they didn't want to put my lead pipe on it yet. They wanted to use their own lead pipe. I said, no, it's got to have my bell, my lead pipe, the tunable branch. I need it. I got to have it that way. And I built the prototype, and it plays good. Every bit as good as my previous ones, which pretty widely accepted as
correct.
And it plays really good. And I'm just waiting on them to sort out all the problems over there. And hopefully when the world gets back on track, they will as well. And I'm waiting on some parts too, by the way. I got enough in stock to do about 75 trumpets, but I'm out of flugelhorn stuff right now. And other than the Euro model, which you've had one of my original ones, and you know how good they play. So I'll get you one right away as soon as I've got them. Okay.
Fantastic.
Oh, thanks for coordinating the music too. That's Richard's expertise on this broadcast.
Hey, did Richard Fink have a question?
Oh boy.
Checking.
Yeah, he may.
He just chimed in because everyone's been enjoying this. Has been a wild ride, guys. And, I think we could stay here for probably another 2 hours or so. Easy.
We could.
And Tony, you know what I think? I think what we might do is try and find some of these great questions and maybe let you interact with some of these people afterwards.
Okay.
I think we should pick some of these winners to give them these Scodwell polos.
Yeah.
And psych some people up. So, guys behind the scenes, let's pick 2 or 3 winners and give them some free gear. Who we got? Dave Norman, of course, was asking some great questions along the way. Dave, thanks so much for tuning in. Who else we got? Who's another winner for one of our prizes here?
We've got little Scodwell USA keychains.
Yeah. Well. Richard Kessler also asking some great questions. We appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. And let's pick one more person to give a Scodwell shirt away to. Bruce Dougal.
Bruce.
Hey.
Bruce.
Hey.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, Bruce.
Guys, we had people watching from as far as South Africa. We had people tuning in from the West Coast, the East Coast, all over the place. This has been an incredible time, really an incredible wealth of information and truly awesome to hear just the history and how it plays into you making some of the finest instruments that really a professional player can play. I mean, I think it just speaks to your caliber and to the history and to just the places you've been. I think you could feel it in the trumpets. I'm sure Lee would agree.
Absolutely.
Guys, this has been incredible. This is really, I've enjoyed every second of this, and we could go for much longer, and it's felt like not just a blink of an eye, but we've been on here for quite a time, guys.
Well, what you're looking at for time schedule? Are we running out?
We're pushing it, but if you got another thing you want to go into, we can go one more question maybe.
I would like if we got time to play a short cut.
Yeah, let's play one more song and let you dip into it real quick. I think that's a good way to close it off. We'll play it out with a song here.
Memories of You would be ideal.
Absolutely. Let's tee it up.
And I'll brief you on. I recorded this with my big band in Las Vegas with all the guys I normally work with, and the great Tom DeLibero was playing first trumpet. Walt Manning playing first trombone. Everybody I like, Rocky Lombardo, his wife Ruthie on piano. And I did this great arrangement that came out of the Ted Heath band originally. And it's a trumpet duet on Memories of You. And I recorded the second part live with the band. And I was kind of feeling my oats, and it ends on a D above staff. And so I held it forever, forgetting the next day I was going to put the first part over, which ends on a G. So that's the Memories of You story, but enjoy it because it sure tells you the kind of sound my horns produce.
Let's do it. Let's bring it in.
Terrific.
I would like to say that this is a very special night.
No.
Nope.
That's not it. That's another good one, but for another time.
Uh-oh. Well, then we're going to have to take a shot in the dark here and just try some other ones and see what plays. That it?
That's it. Yeah, Tony.
Unbelievable.
Tony, you're the best.
Unbelievable.
Good
That's
job.
it.
Good job.
Thank you
That's
so much. Incredible.
That's one of 7 pieces that Hal Leonard publishes on my Big Band Classics featuring Tony Scodwell. And you can play that duet with your partner, and there's 6 other pieces that if you play all 7 in a row, you're tired when you finish.
Very good. Very good.
Oh, thanks guys for everything, man.
Tony, I think we've already had calls for a round 2. I think we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to tee something up and do this again sooner than later. I know there's more stories, and I know there's more information to share. So I really would look forward to it. I can't wait for more. Everyone watching, thank you for tuning in and joining us for this. This has really been a special night. And guys, we'll see you next time. And Tony, again, thank you so much. We appreciate the relationship. We appreciate all that you do. And sincerely, we really, we wouldn't be doing this without guys like you. And it makes it a joy to be a part of this industry. So thank you very much.
Well, I feel exactly the same way, because without Chuck Levin's Washington music, I don't exist.
It's a part of us, and we thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony. You're the best.